Okay. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Oklahoma Alliance for Healthy Families, I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Jacqueline McDaniel. When the Alliance for Healthy Families was founded 3 years ago, we set out our mission, which was simply to provide education around vaccinations. Over the last 3 years, we've partnered with dozens of organizations to bring science-based information to Oklahomans and to Oklahoma leaders. As you all know, recently the FDA authorized the COVID-19 vaccines for adolescents, 12 to 15 years of age, allowing us to be one step closer to returning to a sense of normalcy so we can take off our masks, get together with friends and family safely, and even go on vacation. We recognize that families are being tasked with making a monumental decision and have many unanswered questions about safety of the vaccine, what to expect afterwards, and where to go to access those vaccines. We know that COVID-19 is usually milder in children as compared to adults. However, some get very sick and suffer complications from COVID-19. This is a judgment-free zone. So today we want to be able to provide accurate information and resources on the COVID-19 vaccine, and also encourage parents to talk to their healthcare providers so they can make the best decision for their children. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Clarke, President of the Oklahoma State Medical Association. A native Oklahoman, Dr. Clarke earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Central Oklahoma before attending the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine in Oklahoma City. Dr. Clarke completed her family medicine residency in Wisconsin, where she was named Chief Resident and Outstanding Senior. She then practiced in Dallas area for 4 years before returning to Oklahoma in 2008 to establish her medical practice in Stillwater. Prior to her selection as the 4th female president of the Oklahoma State Medical Association, Dr. Clarke served as Speaker of the House of Delegates, Vice President and President-elect of the organization. Dr. Clarke is also an active member of the Oklahoma Academy of Family Physicians. Dr. Clarke, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I know there's a lot of questions circulating about vaccinations, and especially in teenagers, so it's nice to be here to have a discussion with you all.
Great. Thank you all who submitted questions prior to today's event, and we will get to as many as we can. Feel free to post your questions in the comments as well. We encourage questions and open discussion. However, we adhere to a be nice, be respectful policy. So any comments that do not align with that policy may result in participants being banned. We are live today, but this Q&A will be posted right here on our Facebook page. Please feel free to share. And with that, let's get to our questions. So the first question that came in is, why should kids get vaccinated?
I hear that a lot in my office, so that's a really great question. The concerns that children should be vaccinated, well, my child is young, they're 16, they're 15, they're not likely to have serious illness from COVID-19. So why is it important for my child to be vaccinated if they're not going to get sick? We are all part of a population that we interact with each other. And even if there is a part of the population that may not get ill, seriously ill, there are other members of the population that might. And that is where the spread becomes an issue. If I'm a young person and I feel just fine, maybe feel a little mildly ill, and I have COVID, I'm passing that to my parents, my aunts, uncles, my teachers, my physicians potentially, my grandparents, great-grandparents. So as we're trying to mitigate a infection like this in our population, and that population could be your family, it could be your school, it could be your city, it could be your state. In this instance, it's a global pandemic, so it's global population, which is pretty daunting if you think about it. But it's all about reducing the spread of vaccine to especially individuals who are extremely high risk. So we need everyone vaccinated.
Okay, great. Is there a specific type of COVID vaccine that teenagers should get?
The vaccines that are available in the United States are the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine is the only one that is currently under okay to use in those teenagers 12 to 15. 16 and older have the ability to use any 3 of the vaccines, as those have been cleared by the FDA for emergency use.
How was the vaccine vetted? So how do we know the vaccine is safe for teenagers?
The vaccines, this is probably the most common question I get, so this is a great question. People think, well, it's too soon, not enough trials. There are millions, literally tens of millions of vaccine doses that have been given in studies, not just here in the United States, but planetary. And we track these information parts through our state, through the national level, and even globally. It's not been tested on 14 teenagers. We have a large number of children who have done very well with this vaccine. It is very safe and very effective. We will continue to follow those trials because even though something looks safe, we always continue to follow, and the FDA will continue to follow these vaccines for actually more than the 2 years recommended. They will continue to follow for basically forever that we use them.
Okay. Are the vaccine doses the same for kids as they are for adults?
At this point, from 12 and up, it is the same. The next question to that follow-up will be, as we're continuing to have trials in younger children, the question will be, what's that dose going to be? And it probably will be less. We're not quite sure if it's going to be half a dose, half adult dose, a quarter adult dose, but that is the current working process that we're looking at for younger than 12. And likely they will use a smaller dose, and that helps for 2 reasons. We always want in medicine, this goes for everything, lowest effective dose for anything. That includes any medications, that includes vaccines. So we want the lowest effective dose, and if we can do half dose or quarter dose, then that means that we have multiplied numbers of doses for our teenagers. So instead of 1 dose per adult, we could have 1 dose for four 10-year-olds. That's all what is going to be evaluated and looked at in the next 6 to 12, 14, 18, 24 months. But we know they're very effective. We just need to know what that dose is going to be.
Okay. So along those lines, when we talk about like younger children, right? What is the status of vaccine research in children younger than 12?
The vaccines are currently being evaluated right now. There is a test group that is, I'm going to try not to say this wrong, should be 6 to 11. And then another group that will be down to 6 months to 10. Or 6 months to 5 and 5 years. And those are being stair-stepped. We will probably have the next group up for consideration for emergency use sometime in the late summer, early fall. And that is for the Pfizer vaccine. So we'll make this clear. The first one that will come through as far as younger than 12 should be the Pfizer vaccine, just like we've seen. And some of the other vaccines will come out in the meantime.
Great, thanks. So another question is, obviously everyone's talking about this, right? Is the vaccine safe for teens and for kids? But also, are there other risks for teenagers and children that might not be present for adults?
That's always a question. As we know at this point, with the large number of doses that we have right now, we know that the vaccine is safe. Now, there is a lot of people that will say, well, how do I know something's not going to turn up 10 years from now? Well, there's no way to answer that. The ability to have following safety features with our FDA and continuing these down the road is extremely, extremely good. And it's very rare that with the technology we have and the tracking ability we have today, that we've been using vaccines for the last effectively 70 years. There's very, very, very unlikely that 20 years from now, we're going to find something that was wrong with a vaccine that caused all these defects. Now, there is no certainty in anything. There's no certainty in life. So can I guarantee that? Absolutely not. Am I totally comfortable giving this vaccine to my children or my patients? Absolutely. Because the risk for COVID and COVID infection is much higher than any theoretic possible risk that we might see 20 years down the road.
Okay. Another question was specific to children with disabilities. Is this vaccine safe for those children?
The vaccine is safe for children. We've not seen any specific adverse effects. If someone is concerned, they should absolutely discuss with their pediatrician or their family doctor and go over that with them. We have not seen a specific adverse event in any of the disabilities.
Okay. So if children and teens are less likely to get sick from COVID-19, why do they need the vaccine?
Basically, keep from spreading it to other people who are. We are all part of a global herd, so to speak. And if I get sick and I do fine, that's okay, but that doesn't help our overall population if I've spread it to 10 other people. I need to protect everyone else around me, not just myself. And we're just kind of all in the same boat together on this.
So are there any teens or preteens who shouldn't get the vaccine?
Very important to know this, because this is one of the things that is extremely sensitive. If you are allergic to any part of the vaccine, now I'm not necessarily saying the part of the vaccine that we're using as from the virus particle, but there are stabilizers and liquids and things like that we use in any vaccine or any medication that is part of the product itself. So if you are allergic to any of those products, any of those portions of that product, then no, you should not use the vaccine. People ask me, I'm going to give you a second question. Well, how do I know if I'm allergic to it? How do I know what's in it? That does become a little complicated, but if you have a true allergic reaction to a first vaccine, then that's a vaccine you don't get again. Most of the time you don't know you're allergic until you have a vaccine, but that is extremely, extremely rare. We magnify this, we make this sound a big deal, but I will tell you that in almost all medication literature, they will say if you are allergic to any or part of the medication, do not take. That is across the board, not specifically just for the vaccine. So that is really just, hey, if you're allergic, if you get the first shot and you have an allergic reaction, then we're just not going to give you the second shot. And I'm going to give you another caveat to that. If you have someone these few patients who are allergic, who cannot take the second dose, their immune response is not going to be as high as if they have both. So by me and you and everyone else getting vaccinated, that's protecting them. Their problem is that they cannot be fully vaccinated. So I have to be able to protect them also. So that's another reason that it's really important that everyone gets vaccinated so we can protect the ones who truly can't get it.
Gosh, that's a really, really good point. So one of the things that we've seen a lot of information or misinformation about is that the vaccine can cause infertility. And so a question came through is, does COVID-19 affect my child's fertility?
We have no evidence that infertility is affected in any way, either positive or negatively with the COVID-19 vaccine. I'm not quite sure where some of that misinformation began, but there has been in the year that we've been following the vaccines right now, there is no change in fertility rates. There is no change in the birth rates. There is nothing. Again, how do I know it's not going to affect them 10 years down the road? I have no guarantee about that, but these vaccines do not integrate into any of the fertility of both either males or females. There is no integration. It is only effectively working on with the immune system, and that does not integrate with the reproductive system. So there's no evidence of that. And we're trying to help a lot of our teenagers and even early 20 somethings understand this, because we still have 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds who are concerned about this also, not just the teens and preteens and their parents. So it's important to understand that these vaccines don't integrate anywhere into the reproductive system. So we don't expect to have any effect on that, and we've not seen that.
Okay. So, the COVID vaccine was developed rather quickly. Should I be concerned about that?
The one thing that was fast about this vaccine is the virus itself. The vaccine technology that we have is not new. This is technology that we've used for a long time, going on 10 years. So the ability to make the vaccine is really not new. It's new if you've never heard about it going forward, but in the scientific and medical world, it's not new. We see these in other areas. The difference is that the virus is different. So what piece of material we use from the COVID-19 virus is the difference. And the question was always, when we started with vaccine trials, what piece of the virus will be the most effective in producing a long-lasting immunity? Not the safety, because we've done this multiple times before with other viruses, and we know that these kinds of vaccines are extremely safe. It's just the question of what's going to be effective. And that was always what we were trying to figure out. There have been some vaccine trials that never went anywhere with COVID because that piece didn't work. That small particle of the virus didn't really work. But those are the ones that you don't hear about because they don't go far. They don't show, there's no safety risk, but they don't show a really high immunity production. So those get scrapped and that goes by the wayside. And we continue to focus on the vaccines that do have high immune responses. This is just not new technology, but it is very complicated, and it's understandable that a lot of people have the impression that this is new, and there's been some misinformation on the internet about that this is a new technology. It really is not, but we need to help people understand that these are the things that we in science and medicine do every day. And we're comfortable with this, and that's why we're here talking with people. We have to help people feel as comfortable as I am, so that they can understand what to do for their own health and for their children's health.
So another question is about COVID variants. I've read about COVID variants. Will the vaccine protect my teen or child against them?
That's a good question. We're actually following that information right now in adults. We have somewhat limited information on that for teens and preteens. However, I'm going to make a caveat that the likely is their immunity is probably going to follow the same immunity that the adults will, because it's the same type of vaccine. The current information right now in adults is that they are covering the new variants that we're seeing right now. That may not be the case with variants a year from now. We don't know, we can't predict that. And if if the expectation is that our teens and preteens react and respond the same as adults do with their immune levels, then they should have the same crossover immunity with the variants that we're seeing right now, the variants of concern. I'm going to add another caveat to this too. Another good reason for everyone to be vaccinated. These viruses mutate all the time. All viruses do. That's the nature of a virus. So all viruses do. This is why we have a flu shot every season, because the strains are different every year, and they're different enough that last year's vaccine may not cover this year's vaccine. By vaccinating everyone on this planet, we basically burn out the ability to produce a variant. If you're not infecting a person or whatever, and it's not replicating, it cannot produce variants. So we need to vaccinate everyone so that we can have no question about variants, because they just cannot be made. There's no odds are that we are going to make something new. You can't make anything new if it's not being made at all. So everyone being vaccinated is going to help that variant question down the road also.
Okay. So, we know that there's lower risk for children and teens to get COVID or severe adverse reactions or complications for that. But what about those teenager or preteen that's already had COVID-19? Should they be vaccinated or receive the vaccine?
Yes, they should still be vaccinated. The data we have is when the teen or preteen gets COVID, they recover, their immune system has good response for the first 90 days from the time of infection. After 90 days, there is a point that we see the blood levels of some of these immune proteins start to decline. We're not quite sure why that is, but we do know it's occurring. And those are still the persons that need to be vaccinated, because the interesting thing about the COVID vaccine is that a year in with the Pfizer vaccine, and now we're getting the Moderna data, a year in, those titers, those levels of immune proteins are extremely high. They're still very high in the bloodstream. And it's acting almost better in producing some of these immune proteins than the actual illness. Now, that's early information, that's only a year, but not all vaccines work like this. Some vaccines you have to re-booster. Some viruses, once you get it, you're completely immune for life. So let's use an example of chickenpox. In all intents and purposes, if you get chickenpox, then you're immune mostly for life. Some people do occasionally get recurrences, but you're immune for life. And the vaccine is the same. It has been effectively the same over time. The COVID virus is not acting the same. We're losing some of that immunity. So we suspect you won't be immune for life. There are multiple layers of your immune system, so I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this and too complicated, but those secondary and third and fourth levels of immunity that we have to some of these infections, we don't have all that data yet, because that takes a lot longer, obviously, to track and find information. But the primary initial antibodies that we're talking about in the bloodstream, those we've tracked very, very well. And you lose immunity after infection, you keep those protein levels very high after vaccination. So even if you've had infection, we still need to be vaccinated at some point.
Okay. So what about now? What if a young person has COVID right now? Should they wait? Should they get the vaccine now?
You theoretically could get the vaccine now, but in the most recommendations, when we have any illness, even if it's just a other viral infection, we do prefer not to give a lot of vaccines, and that includes the COVID vaccine, when someone's ill with something else. And I will tell you that it's almost more so with a COVID vaccine, only because we really don't want to have any confusion as to, are we symptomatic because we have another viral infection? Are we symptomatic because of the vaccine itself and we're having some reaction? And we don't want to have any confusion. So for the most part, we would recommend you need to be clear of the virus, clear the illness, and then at some point over time, then consider being vaccinated. You still have a 90-day window where you still are going to have that high immunity. So we have plenty of time to vaccinate these people, and that goes for adults and teenagers and preteens. But we just prefer not to add insult to injury at that point.
So this question is on medication. So can my child take normal medications before the COVID vaccine?
As far as we know, normal medications before the vaccine, you should not stop any particular medications if your child is on a medicine without talking to your physician. Now, we don't know of any medication that should negatively affect the vaccine, with one exception. The medications that are used to treat juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, adult arthritis, some of the immune suppressants may affect the ability for the body to develop antibodies after a vaccine. So if someone has a rheumatologic disease, their teen or preteen sees a rheumatologist, then that should be a question for the rheumatologist. These are pretty rare in younger people. Juvenile rheumatoid arthritis is actually relatively uncommon, but those are questions that would be the one area that you might want to talk with your rheumatologist. But other than that, the rest of the medications, there should not be any other interactive problems with medication.
Okay. So I think a lot of times parents give their kids ibuprofen right before a flu shot or any other sort of vaccine. Can a child take ibuprofen or antihistamine before COVID-19 to offset any maybe potential side effects?
That's another great question. I always hesitate to answer these questions when I get these floated to me, only because I don't want to give any parent advice on giving medications like this. Those are questions that just need to be floated to your physician, because I can't know everything about everyone's child. So I hedge a little bit on these kinds of questions. Generally, most people are tolerating this virus vaccine very well, even though we hear some, side effects. But the vast majority of people, 70–80%, have no really side effects other than a sore arm at all. You do hear low-grade fevers and feeling terrible for a couple of days. If someone has symptoms, then you might be more likely to treat with ibuprofen or Tylenol or something along those lines. But doing so before to preempt that, probably not going to be necessary for the vast majority of our kids. But again, these are questions that you need to talk with your pediatrician or your family doctor about that child, because they know their each individual's history.
So another question is, do I need to accompany my child to the vaccination? And what documents should I bring to the vaccination site to prove his or her age or their age?
You do need to accompany anyone that is under 18 needs to have accompaniment by an adult. The adult has to be a guardian of some sort. Now, if you're the parent and you have their information, I have some of the website pulled up here, so just a moment. And your insurance cards, those kinds of things are fine. Documents for birth certificates are fine. We do have a lot of parents who are married into the family who are do not have the same last name. So if I have a stepmother or stepfather, there are legal documents that you should probably have available. And a lot of these we see at our doctor's office anyway. We have those on file. If you're a foster parent and you are vaccinating a child, then those documents all need to be available when you go in. So you do need to prove that you are the legal guardian somehow of that person under 18. If from day 18-1, a person can go in without a parent, but that's because of the legal definition of adults. So anybody under exactly 18th birthday, you do have to have some documentation as a guardianship.
Okay. So what if my child is exposed to COVID-19 after they're vaccinated?
Depends on the time. If they have been vaccinated and it is more than 2 weeks after being vaccinated, then their immunity is actually quite strong. Some people will recommend to be tested after 2 or 3 days at that point, just for surety. If it's less than 2 weeks, then less than 2 weeks after the second dose. Okay, so I'm gonna make that clear and back up. For the Pfizer vaccine, it's 2 doses. Full immunity is 2 weeks after the second dose. So if we've been vaccinated with one of the shots, or we just got the second shot and we're exposed the next day, then your risk of contracting COVID is higher, and you should follow the same rules that we did before, that you might have been a COVID contact. So trying to quarantine, potentially being tested, those things that we have been kind of discussing with over time. But the timing is important. I'm going to say this one more time. 2 weeks after the second dose is when you are fully immunized from a vaccine. So getting one dose, being exposed the second day, you have probably very, very little immunity, and act like that was a true exposure and take precautions and quarantine, etc.
Okay. After receiving both doses, can my child stop wearing a mask?
That is a good question. We just had a lot of discussion on this from the CDC. They have come out a couple of weeks ago. My days run together. So a couple of weeks ago, that if you are fully vaccinated and you are going to do low risk activities, then you probably do not need to wear a mask. If you are not vaccinated, you should continue to wear a mask, because masking protects others around you. So if I don't know if I'm infected, I need to protect others around me. I need to continue my vaccine, my mask. If we are vaccinated and I can't spread it to anyone else, then I don't need necessarily to wear a mask. There are many different caveats to this. You know, I'm sure people are going to write in and ask, well, what if? There's all kinds of caveats to these questions. And I tell my patients that you are likely not going to be infected. You are likely not going to spread a virus to someone else, but use your best level of judgment and don't do things that are uncomfortable to you. I'm not saying we should go to a 30,000 member concert venue tomorrow and everyone, you know, go without a mask, but we do have data that if you are vaccinated, especially since about 50% of the United States have been vaccinated, if you're vaccinated, the likelihood is going to be relatively low that you will be infected. Okay. Now, I'm going to add one more thing to that. I don't know, and nobody knows what your immunity is going to be a year from now. We change rules on people, and that does make people annoyed, and I understandably so. And we've changed a lot of things throughout the last year, and people do get frustrated. And believe me, working in medicine, I completely understand that. So as it stands right now, we know that these vaccines are safe and very effective, but boy, what happens if we figure out a year or two from now that that immune system is starting to wane and we're all starting to see these uptick infections? Well, then we may need to go back to doing a little bit more masking, and we may need to do reboostering of a vaccine. We just don't know that yet. But as it stands right now, the immunity is really, these vaccines are really just better than most vaccines that we see in medicine. These are really effective.
Okay. Should I be concerned about having my older vaccinated teen around their younger sibling who's not vaccinated?
No, that is part of your household bubble. So as a general rule, as we are vaccinating people, we've seen this across the board in even our adult population where one person is vaccinated and the other person maybe couldn't, or when the parents are vaccinated and we can't vaccinate the children yet. So if that's still part of your regular bubble and you're continuing to do the safe things that we've been recommending, no, you don't need to have a concern at this point, and just work as soon as we can. We'll get those next younger kids vaccinated too.
Also, as kids are getting out of school now, but as they prepare to get up to date on their regular shots for school, is there a concern to have our regular childhood vaccinations along with COVID?
Wow, you guys are giving me some good questions here. The current recommendations are not to give another vaccine within 2 weeks of a plus or minus of a COVID vaccine. And that goes back not because it's unsafe or not because we expect it to be unsafe, but that goes back to if someone has a reaction, we don't want any confusion of was it the polio vaccine we gave or was it the COVID vaccine we gave. So we're trying not to do that. The recommendations are going to probably continue to do, if we're going to do a COVID vaccine, then you need to decide if we're due for a childhood vaccine like a tetanus shot or an HPV vaccine or a meningitis shot that you're going to see in the preteen years, then you need to really decide what's the most risk, what's the highest risk that you're thinking about. And it might be, I'm going to camp, so I probably need to get my COVID vaccine right this second and do that first. And we'll give the school vaccines. We'll do those right before we start school in the fall. It may be different. It may be we're getting ready to start in the fall and we really want those routine vaccines in first. And that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to a certain extent, because as soon as we give those vaccines, you count 2 weeks and then we can start that COVID vaccine and get both in. If you do your COVID first, you'd have to do your first COVID, your second COVID 3 weeks later, and then wait another 2 weeks for full vaccination and get the subsequent school age vaccines. So there is a little bit of you might do one, you might do the other, and it really depends on where we are and what your risk is going to be. We should talk to our pediatricians and family doctors about that. Most are probably going to say, get that COVID vaccine in as soon as you can, and then we don't have a question about doing any of the other vaccines for school when school comes around in the fall.
Okay. This is related to insurance, and I think you've actually already answered this. Do I need insurance for my teen to be eligible to receive the vaccine?
The vaccine is free to anyone who wants it in the United States, and that's part of the bills that have been passed through Congress in the last year. Monies have been put aside so that there should be no cost for the vaccine to you. We do recommend that you do take your insurance cards with you, because there are some insurances that may expect you to pay for the injection, the doing the vaccine itself, the professional fee, if you want to call it that. I would say that most do not. Most are covering most of those fees. So you do want to make sure that you have that insurance, the information available in case they want that. But the vaccine itself is free to anyone who wants that in the United States.
Okay. So this question came in and says, okay, so my pediatrician's office has declined to carry the vaccine because it requires cold storage. Where can I get my child vaccinated and how do I sign up?
Another good question. So you can sign up through the state portal. You can call your local pharmacies. Many of the local pharmacies, I know I work in Stillwater, that's my primary base. All of our pharmacies do have it available. Most of the large pharmacy chains do have vaccines available. Those a lot of times can be walk-in basis, and at this point, we've had a lot of the rush for the vaccines taken care of right now. So a lot of these places are walk-in. We are working over time to roll these out to our pediatrician and our family doctor offices and our internal medicine offices. The problem with the storage ability has been the big primary issue, because if you don't have those huge big freezers that we can keep things ultra cold, then you really can't have the vaccine. You just can't do it. But as we're going forward, we are finding more and more information on some of these vaccines that they can be stored for a moderate amount of time at warmer temperatures. Now, the Pfizer, which is the truly ultra cold, there's a little bit, you have to be really careful about that, because if it's 5 minutes over or an hour over what the time is that the FDA says it's available to use, then you got to throw the whole thing away. So a lot of offices, it's storage is an issue, but a lot of offices, it's a little bit about concern and a little anxiety that we're going to waste those vaccines because we're going to mess up the storage. We're going to mess up. We took it out of the freezer and we put it in the refrigerator, which you can do for some of them up to 6 hours, 12 hours, sometimes 5 days. Well, what if someone leaves it out on the counter? What if we don't document it right? What if someone doesn't mark when it was initially opened or moved? So some of this is not just the storage ability. Some is the anxiety about the logistics of tracking when it was open, when it was moved, when it was done this, who put it here, how did this happen? It becomes a lot more complicated than just the storage. There's about 1,700 doctor offices in Oklahoma at this point that do have them or are in process of getting them. And we're working through the State Medical Association to really help those offices make these smooth transitions and try and get those into more offices at this point. But it is it's more than just, let's go get a vaccine out of the refrigerator and give it. Over time, it looks like we're probably going to be able to leave these out longer and have less of an issue with degradation in the vaccine, but you can't guess. So you have to do the most difficult thing up front. And then as you learn more down the road, it really may be that 6 or 12 months from now, we realize that, wow, we don't really need to ultra cold it. Once we open it, it's good for 14 days in the refrigerator. I mean, who knows? I'm guessing. I'm totally making that up, but you just don't know until we get there. So you have to be the most aggressive conservative that you can be about controlling the coldness of these vaccines until we know more. But we're working to try and make this a little less anxiety ridden with these vaccines as we go forward. So it's a good question, but stay tuned and we'll probably have more information for you in the next 6 to 12 months.
Great. So it looks like we may be down to our very last question. So if a parent is still concerned about getting the shot for their children, what should they do?
Talk to your physician. Talk to your not just your physician, but your children's physician. And in my case, it's the same because I'm a family doctor and I see parents and children together. And I would say many people who are reading information and watching the news have a lot of anxiety about this. And it's not to say that when they come and talk to us as their physician that everything's hunky-dory and it's unicorns and rainbows and all this kind of stuff, but people trust their physicians. They want to hear from what their physician says. And being a good physician means helping your patients understand the best course of medicine for them. And if you have a relationship with a physician that you really trust, your regular doctors, they're not going to purposely steer you wrong. They're not going to, make any truly malicious decisions for that. We want our patients to be as healthy as we possibly can. That is just, that's what we do. We love what we do. We love taking care of people. And we like to know that what we do is helping. So your relationship with your primary providers is probably the best information you're going to get, but expect them to sit down for a few minutes and just give you a bit of information. Now, your doctor is not going to be able to sit and talk an hour with you like we are doing today. And I understand that, and I definitely appreciate that. But your doctor should be able to spend just a few minutes of their time to help you understand so that you're more comfortable and we can help make a decision together as a team about what we want to do with our teenagers and our preteens.
Okay. In referring back to your question about, or the parents' question about where, I think we were going to add a few links in the comment, but we're having a little trouble adding those. So stay tuned. We'll certainly add them on our Facebook page once we're off here, if that doesn't get posted to the comments now. So that brings us to the end of our Q&A today. Thank you again so much, Dr. Clarke, for your time. To everyone who has joined us today and for all of the folks that sent in their questions. As a reminder, we are live, but this Q&A will be posted right here on our Facebook page, so please feel free to share. We encourage, just want to reiterate what Dr. Clarke has been saying, we encourage everyone to have a conversation with your doctor for any continued questions or concerns you have, because your doctor is going to know you and your family best. So again, we'll be posting this along with some resources, and have a great day. Thank you.